Okay, I am back. Just getting the camera going. I think. There we go. Great. In focus with the palette. I think we're pretty good. All right, so let's see. I am recording. Not through Zoom, but I am recording. We will double check. Good. Okay, I've got everybody muted. So, as always, if you have a question, comment, feel free to bust in and interrupt me. There is no bad time to jump in with anything that you want to say or ask, and there's no stupid questions. So let's get started. Welcome everybody to our group session for November 2021, the demo portion. We're going to be painting Persimmons on pink glass. You can see the photo down in the lower left, but I'm going to go ahead and hide that for just a second while we talk about the palette. To save us some time, I did some pre-mixing. Many of you have seen me do a lot of mixing already, but if you've got a question about how I made a particular color as we're going along, feel free to ask. And the answer is probably going to be a little bit of red, yellow, and blue. But because I have such brilliant oranges, my orange mixtures are staying a bit closer to the tube today. Although persimmons are interesting because they're such a pinky orange that I am going to have white in there. Whereas if I was painting the light side of, say, like a citrus orange, I might not have any white anywhere near the light side of that object. But I don't have tube orange on my palette. I usually don't. So we were mixing everything from the primaries. I sent you all a graphic of the palette that I'm using, but we'll run through the colors really quick. Yellow ochre, Hansa yellow, cad yellow. This is a mixed orange from cad red light and cad yellow. So that's not a tube color. Titanium white, very dirty. Warm white, cad red light, alizarin crimson. Dioxazine purple, radiant violet, mixed brown. Phthalo blue red shade, which to be honest I haven't used in any of these mixtures yet, so I don't actually think I'll be using it in this painting at all. Ultramarine blue, ivory black. Everything else is mixed. This is the color that I'll do the underpainting with. It's a mixture of cad yellow, cad red, and some of the alizarin crimson with a little ultramarine blue. So an orange mixed from the primaries, and that's what I'll do the entire underpainting with. These are all the colors that I mixed for the persimmons. But the persimmons and some of the dark pinks in the plate are really going to kind of run together. So these lights are mainly mixed from the cad red light, the alizarin crimson, the two yellows. So the two reds, the two yellows, and then varying degrees of the warm white. And I gave myself a lot of options. Some lights, some midtones, some darks. I think this is going to be the shadow on the plate, but I'm not really sure. These are the colors for the plate. These are the colors for the negative space. You notice that I'm being pretty careful as I'm mixing to compare my values. Because that glass plate, I mean, it's really, really light, but it's just a little bit darker, even in its lightest parts, than the white paper. That's how we can feel that it's glass and not, or that it's something that it's slightly colored. It's not the same. It's not clear glass, but even if it was clear glass, we'd want it to be just that little bit of distortion to help us feel that. So if this is going to be my light part of the background and that's going to be my glass, I can compare those and say, well, how close together are they? And they're pretty far, actually. So my guess is, I don't know if I want to really do that. My guess is that the plate stuff is going to come closer to this. And for the ground, I've mixed sort of a warmer and a cooler version, although I want it all to be cooler than these colors, which it is. And then all this stuff over here is for the persimmon leaves, including this, and I don't really know what I'm going to need, actually. I just need, I mean, it isn't really green when you look at it, and I'll turn the picture back on now so we can see it. It's a sort of a, it's funny, it's like our mind says it's leaves, it's green, but for one thing, these persimmons are old. I picked them like a while ago, like 2 weeks ago, or maybe like a week and a half ago. And the leaves are all kind of crusty, and the stem thingies they're pretty dry. But yeah, it's, the mind wants to tell us that it's green. It's another one of those cases where we need to be objective and look with our eyes, not thinking leaf. So here you can see I've got a little preliminary sketch that I did for composition. It's a simple composition. It's a lot like what I have in the photograph, actually. And this sketch I did in Procreate, and then I printed it out. It's just with one of the pencils in Procreate, which I'm pretty bad with, but I just wanted to kind of practice. And you can see my little note to self, hit record, I did it. Okay, so I'm working on an 8x8. Let's zoom in. Sorry for the zooming. Focused. Good. I'm working on an 8x8 Raymar Arches oil paper panel. Good. I am recording. Indeed, I am. I know, I'm not recording through Zoom, I'm recording through OBS, which is the streaming program that I'm using. It's a higher res form of recording, so I get a better quality video. But I can see it right there. It's recording 8 minutes and 55 seconds through my OBS window. I think we're good. But thank you for that. I need the reminders and the help. Okay, so let's get going. So it is this Raymar, they call it oil painting paper. It is Arches oil paper. That's the product, 58A. And because it's Arches oil paper, are we gonna tone? Yeah, we'll give it a really light tone. When I work on Arches oil paper, I like to sort of wake it up with a wash of clear Gamsol. I don't usually tone my canvas when I work on Arches oil paper because it doesn't let me pull the lights out as well as gessoed canvas would. So maybe I'll just sort of compromise and do a very light tonal wash. We're getting that Gamsol on there, and then we're getting a little bit of color too. And again, this is that mixture of mostly Cad Yellow and Cad Red Light, but then I did put some alizarin in and some ultramarine blue to neutralize it. We want to make sure we get the whole thing sort of wet. And again, I apologize for my sniffling and heavy breathing. I have a cold.
Your autofocus is kind of going crazy.
Is it? All right, let's go to man. All right, we'll go to manual then. No, thank you. This part's always hard for me. That looks pretty good. Right. And I have to get, I don't know, it's pretty difficult for me to see that. It looks okay to me now, but holler if it doesn't look all right as I'm going. Okay, so continuing with the same color, just adding some Gamsol. Lens caps, multifunctional. I can kind of start with my landmarks from my sketch, and then pretty rapidly I will want to move over to looking with my eyes. And yeah, I'm shortening this stick a little bit. I don't think I want to crop the stick, so I'm just choosing to see it as being a little bit shorter than it is. I think that's okay. Artistic license. Now, we have been talking recently about transfer methods. If I had wanted to print this out, or you can't see it, but my Procreate sketch, if I wanted to print it out at the size of my canvas, I could figure that out on my computer, how to print it at 8x8 and do that transfer method with the paint on the back and kind of printing it. It's that gesture here. Did a demo last week for an art group in Canada. I think it was like 2 weeks ago. It was kind of fun. They were a very diverse group. It was a big group. It was like 60 people there. But they wanted an hour. 1 hour. And I don't know, I gave myself what I thought was a simple still life, and it was, I don't know, I did the underpainting first, thank God, but I did not finish it in an hour. So maybe somebody could like holler at me at the 1 hour mark, because I don't want to beat this up too much. I want it to stay kind of loose and fresh, and see if I can maybe twisted 20 it. All right, I know I'm getting a little away from my drawing with the composition. Coming a bit close to the edge with that leaf. This leaf is taped to that persimmon. I will admit that. I always say that my studio practice is brought to you by masking tape. And it definitely is today. All right, so ellipses. And I'm gonna check this in my studio rear view mirror before I move on into the overpainting stage for sure. Dark shape. Kind of fun little shadow. Everything's getting a bit big. But what I like about, I mean, this plate has lots of ellipses. It's got this kind of inner ellipse and the outer ellipse, and then it's got the shadow, the cast shadow underneath, which I've always liked about painting this plate. That it has that sort of interesting offset ellipse of the cast shadow. So we have a lot of ellipses, but the way that the persimmons are arranged on the plate, I can divide them up into sections, so I can kind of draw that shape. And then I can look at this shape.
I find that the painting is photograph the persimmons look sharp.
Mm-hmm.
Painting is very blurry. People are saying that it's blurry.
Is anybody else having a problem with the painting? I mean, it's going to be a little bit grainier than the photograph because it's room lighting live camera feed. The photo is just sort of stuck on there, picture in picture. Do we need to refocus, guys?
It's a bit blurry, but it's okay.
All right.
It's pretty blurry, actually.
All right.
Yeah, it's not usually like this.
Okay. Great. This is good.
I don't know if it's the angle of the painting going back or something. It's not on the left it looks sharp, and as you go to the right, it's really.
That could be it. But this is, as far as positioning, if I need the stuff in the left-hand side, it's about as good as I can do with the camera angle being slightly off to the side.
That looks, I found looks sharp.
All right, well, let's see if we can go forward and if it stays looking all right. Yes, I know, it's not as crisp.
Your painting look. That's the joke.
I didn't hear that. Your audio cut out. Okay, and like with any round shape, I'm going to work my way into it with line segments, because every time my paintbrush comes up, my eyes can go back to the still life. And we want to be looking at the still life. At this stage, I do as much or more than I'm looking at my canvas. Every time my brush comes up, as I'm drawing these ellipses with these geometric line segments, every time my brush comes up, my eyes will go back to the still life. Now there is just a slight little bit of plate back there. And then we can try to pull out some lights in our, yeah, they're coming out okay a little bit. It's sort of unclear what's happening right there, and we'll come in and firm up the drawing a bit in just a moment. All right, so into my underpainting color, I'm going to pull a little bit of alizarin crimson and a little bit of ultramarine blue. And we'll come in and revisit our darkest darks. You know, some of this stuff, like in this stick, I may not even paint over it. That could just stay from the underpainting. The level of block in or underpainting that you do before launching in with color is totally up to you. It's all about what your comfort zone is with how well you think you understand what you're looking at. This is the cast shadow of this leaf. You want to feel like you're in a good position, understanding what you're looking at. I'm going to let that come out a little bit beyond. But certainly, you don't need a really high level of detail because we need to feel willing to paint over it, right? Don't want to get too precious about it. Okay, and I don't need to get into rendering leaves, but I do want to get that shape, and I'm going to try to mask those two where they come together. And so what's my intended focal point here? I kind of was thinking, let's let the leaf crop. Something should crop. Could. I kind of was thinking this guy and his leaf might be sort of a fun focal point for this piece. it may end up being this one down here, because there's a very kind of interesting highlight in the plate right there. So yeah, we'll see what happens. But the way I've intended to do it, we're looking here for the focal point. And flatten that ellipse out a little bit more. And then, oh, we've got beautiful pinks in there, reflecting. Come in, show myself my darks, shadow family, light family, just really quickly, bedbug line, form shadow, cast shadow. This is the cast shadow of the plate. It kind of comes through there and goes out. And this guy needs a form shadow too, and this is all going to be dark. But what's cast shadow and what's the leaf? That's going to be all cast shadow, and then he's got this cute little tail. And there's kind of a nice moment in this still life, which I don't want to make it all about this, but where the cast shadow of the plate goes over that leaf. Can you guys see that in the photo? I think so. And then pops out over here. Rear view mirror check of the ellipse. Looks pretty good. It looks like I might be able to extend a bit here with the plate. Good. So where should we start with color? Where do you guys think I'm going to start? For me, with color, it's important to start with what we call an easy win. Something that we think we understand and mixed correctly. And for me, typically that's the lightest, most saturated color, or just maybe the most saturated color in the painting. And so we're going to start with the Persimmons. It'll give us a nice benchmark to judge our next decisions against, because as we know, painting is just a series of decisions, one after another, and each one influences the next. So we want to start out with a decision that feels correct as possible. What's our Kevin McPherson quote? Painting is an initial mistake followed by a series of corrections. And be generous with yourself in this stage. There's no reason to rush this unless, of course, you're giving an hour-long demo. But you want to be, you're working your way into an understanding of everything that's going on during this part of the process also. So I wouldn't shortchange yourself on time in the underpainting just for the sake of getting to it, getting to the part that we always think of as painting, right? This is important too, because what we're doing is we're saying, where are our darkest darks? Where are our lightest lights? And leaving ourselves little notes, because we know when we get on into color later on, we're not going to be having extra mental RAM to be thinking about, are my ellipses correct? What's my darkest dark? Those kinds of things. We want to establish our hierarchy of values now, so we can help ourselves going forward. Okay. At this stage in the process, I would generally stop and do some color mixing, giving this a chance to set up. And I know we've talked in the past about the hair dryer coming in. That is a little bit overkill, or at least I did it for too long and then everything was too dry. So maybe I'll just blow on it a little bit and we'll dive in. I'm going to paint with my number 4 flat, as usual, Princeton synthetic. And let's start. So I have these colors mixed up for the light side of the persimmon. I have this one that I think is probably too saturated, but I'm going to start with that. And then I have this other one that's sort of peachy that I've added white to, because I really am experiencing these persimmons as being pretty pink. But it can be tricky to paint orange on orange. The ground is orange. The color is orange. But looking at it on my palette, I feel pretty confident that the color is all right, at least as a starting point. So we'll put that on, and then we'll just sort of do the rest of it. That one feels yellower. It's not a coloring book. Just because I pre-mixed all this paint doesn't mean I'm just going to go in and paint by numbers. But once, it's magic. It's like once I start putting on the first strokes, I start to get more of a sense of how the colors relate to each other. I mean, we talk a lot about how nothing in a painting exists except in relation to the other things in the painting and color. Value color, it's all like that. It's all relative. And so once I just start investigating, oh, I don't have gel, do I? Once I just start investigating those relationships, my intuition can kick in, but you have to start somewhere. Solvent-free gel, that'll be my medium. I have some walnut oil too, but I probably won't get into that until we get into the negative space, and I want the paint to move a little more quickly. That's a real subtle difference there. It's just my sort of pinkier, lighter. Maybe I want some of that here too. I mean, they almost feel like frosted in places, and this is one of the reasons that I wanted the Radiant Violet on my palette today. Because I think it'll be a nice addition. Or maybe not. But I'm going to try it. And this underpainting stage is the stage where I want to be taking a couple risks with color. First pass. I want to feel kind of free to do some things that are a little bit wild, like when we do the Twisted 20s, when we do our 20-minute paintings. I always say, take risks with color, put something down that's not 100% exact what you see. It doesn't have to stay into the later stages, but it just, maybe it will. Maybe it just might stay, and that would be kind of cool, wouldn't it? To feel that freedom. Yeah. Okay, that's like the full strength. Full blast right there. Just red and yellow. And it's not that easy to see these distinctions yet, as we haven't gotten into the shadow side yet. We're going to go there next. It gets more darker, more rich. I love the beginning stages. I mean, it can feel intimidating, sure, but the beginning stages are great because it's like some of these marks will get to stay till the end, and some of them won't, but some of them definitely will, and it's my goal to have some marks put down at this stage that can stay through the finish, be finished, be part of the finish. Little cast shadows of the leaves. And these are small shapes. This is a small canvas. So I get to be loose and really general. This is one of the reasons that I love painting small, is everything gets to be simplified and kind of put into a shorthand. Simplify and exaggerate. That's what we're doing when we're painting. We're exaggerating the things that say what we want to be saying about the light. Oh, it's a little too much into rendering for me right now. We want to simplify everything that's not serving that purpose. Very red there. Cool. All right, the bedbug line. Now the shadows, it's interesting, like the shadow side of these orange, these persimmons, the shadow parts of the persimmons, it doesn't really look like dark orange to me. On a citrus orange, I generally go pretty red in my shadow side, but these feel cooler in the shadow side. So we're gonna play that up a little bit. Almost greenish in places. Yeah. Put it down. Ask yourself, is that working for me? If it's not, go back to the palette and get something else. And then deep inside the plate, there really is some lovely stuff there. Whoops. For those of you who are new to my recorded demos, my cameras love to do that. They auto shut off every 20 minutes or so. It's not a problem, it's just what they do. We just turn them back on and keep going. So I'm going to do this little bit of work on the persimmons, and then I'm probably going to move into the plate a bit. Yeah, almost green over there. Maybe some yellow ochre. Yeah.
Are you adding a green or a blue to create those shadows?
Yeah, so I just added yellow ochre to my orange there to create that shadow, and it worked pretty well. I mean, against all these really warm colors, yellow ochre pretty much feels like a green to my eye. But no, to create the shadows, I mean, I added probably these colors were created by adding blue, but because there's so much yellow in the mixture already, because it's an orange mixture, it's going to turn it into a brown or a green or a greeny brown. A dark orange, like dark yellow, can be sort of a conundrum. It's like, well, what is dark orange? It is eventually going to be a brown, but is it going to be a warm brown or a cool brown? That's what I'm always asking myself. There's a little shape, there's a little break there between that shadow. Okay, I feel pretty good about this so far, but maybe I just want to bring a little more yellow into one spot here. That is the cast shadow of the leaf. Nice. Because there is, just like in that tomato painting that we were looking at on the group inspiration board, there's a lot of variation within, there's a lot of temperature shifts within the oranges on persimmons, and that's one reason that I've loved painting them a lot over the years, is because of that. Really dark. Using the side of my flat brush. I don't need to change my brush to do a small shape. Just twist the brush, use a different part of the brush. Plate. So generally I like to do darks first, and I kind of consider the plate to be my negative space in a way, because it's so, oh, let's do the pops first. Let's do that. Let's do the really saturated stuff first. Inside that guy, ooh, it's hurting my eyes. Inside that rim, there's this crazy color pop, which I can tone down later, but why not start bold? A little bit of one in here. And we'll kind of put those on, and then we can remove some of it as we want to. But it's really hard to get those light, bright colors to go over other darker colors. So it's nice to sort of lead with those and maybe have more than we actually see, so that we can pick and choose what to keep later on. It's easier to paint over light, bright, saturated colors and tone them down, and it's almost impossible to cover other darker and more neutral colors with your bright, light, saturated colors. I'm glad I remembered to do that. It's a lot like when I paint pomegranates or cranberries. What else? What else is like that? The plums. Remember when we did the plums and I said, lead with the red undertones and make them bigger than you think you want them, and then they can shine through and sort of glow through. And that's, I'm gonna show this little plum painting for a second. Remember that one? It's the same idea. You can always go over that stuff with darker things, but then it gives that lovely sense of transparency, which we want because it's glass. Okay.
Can you say what color you are painting those, you're saying pops of color on the plate? It's a little hard to distinguish.
Yeah.
Is it pink?
Yes.
Is it a pink?
It's a
Pink kind of?
it's a pinky orange.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. So we've got cad red light, cad yellow, alizarin crimson, and white probably in there. Yeah. These are the cast shadows that I'm seeing through the plate. Again, as always, we want to be comparing, as we launch into putting on our cast shadows, we want to be comparing them to the form shadow. Squinting at the photograph, squinting. I know the reflected light's a little bit magnified in the photo, I'm noticing. It is not jumping out that much, although persimmons are shiny, so their reflected light is going to be lighter than some other objects' reflected light might be. But I always want to be comparing, squinting and comparing the values, comparing the value to the form shadow of the persimmon, squinting at my painting, softening the edge where the object meets its shadow, always. Maybe we'll keep that. And let's go ahead and that's what I mixed up. I wanted something cooler because the plate rim shadow is somewhat cooler. Add a little Gamsol to that. We'll just pop that in. This is the shadow of the rim, and we don't want it to be uniform. And maybe we'll use a little bit of this. And I will say, this is not my first rodeo with this plate. I have done a lot of already figuring out of how the cast shadow behaves under the rim and all this. I mean, I've painted this plate half a dozen times in my life at least before, so Sometimes there are multiple benefits to painting an object multiple times. I kind of know what to expect with this plate. And the first few times I painted it, I thought, oh my God, what's going on here? The cast shadow, we see it through the plate, but it looks a lot lighter than it does just on the ground. And then there's this weird little halo that goes on inside the shadow here. But still, that's got to live in the shadow. So really, like, this whole area is cast shadow, but because the glass is translucent, it's not going to be a dark shadow. Hopefully some of that made some sense. Cast shadows, these persimmons are opaque, but they're cast shadows. We're seeing it through the plate, so it's a little bit distorted. But still, they might be a darker cast shadow than something that was translucent. The plate has a cast shadow all here, but it's very, very light. But it's going to be slightly darker than the ground. And I'm going to exaggerate it too, because I want it to really feel like a cast shadow. Okay, and then, cast shadows that are seen through glass, it's a whole deal here, and there's all kinds of interesting things to investigate, comparisons to be made. That one's kind of beautiful. It fades out a lot there. Clean that up later, but it gets very warm. This, where it slides under the plate, this is the cast shadow of this leaf. It gets really warm in there. Let's just push that a little bit farther. Good. Okay, I'm in good shape. I want to go into the plate some more, and we'll hit some of the darks in this rim for some perspective, for something to compare it to. And this isn't photorealism. I want to abstract this. I want to simplify and exaggerate. How much do I really need to paint? It's a smaller canvas. So I don't have the real estate to get in there and even paint all the details if I wanted to. And that's one of my issues when I paint larger, I feel like I have the real estate to get in there and start tightening up, and it's not generally good for my work. So how do you combat that? Well, I didn't do him. You would combat that by using a bigger brush. Using more paint, getting a little sloppy with it, and then reining it back in.
Sir, you're painting with a 4 flat?
Yes, and hi Vivian.
Hi.
Hi. I am painting, that's okay. We're happy to have you. And yes, it's my 4 flat, the same brush that I almost always demo with when I'm with you guys. So this is a fairly large brush for the size of my canvas. That's very cool. Okay, let's put a few lights in the plate, and then we'll go into those dreaded leaves. And why are the leaves intimidating? I'm going to do a few more darks in the stick first. Why are the leaves intimidating? Well, it's a complicated form, for one thing. A lot of folds and bells and whistles there. And if we don't visually understand something like that going in, it can be extremely intimidating, and what really can help with that is a preliminary drawing. I know I always say thumbnail sketches are not drawing practice, and they're not meant to be that way. They're meant to be composition practice. They're meant to be investigations of values. But when a form is really complicated and we don't understand what's going on, like sometimes with a hat perhaps, it can be helpful to do a preliminary study, drawing of it, and just really get in there and investigate the details. And then when we have more of an understanding of what's happening, we can be more free in our painting because we get what's going on. And so if I was really feeling nervous about these guys, I could sit down and slowly and in a relaxed way just zero in on them and do a drawing. I always say drawing is the best thing you can do for your painting. That's not painting. And painting in black and white is the best thing you can do for your painting. It doesn't involve color. Orange color is very dark there, where it comes against the light. All right, I'm enjoying this already. I know I said I was going to go into the light pink, so let's just do that now. So I come to my pre-mixtures and I say, oh my God, of course, they're too dark, they're too saturated. I have to keep an eye on the hierarchy of lights though, because of the highlights that are in the plate up here. Let me get that back on. Those highlights on the plate there are the lightest thing on my canvas. And I have to keep all the other lights subservient to those bright highlights here at 1 o'clock, or they won't be bright. And I can test that on my palette by taking some of what I'm painting and putting it next to my white. Do I have room there? I have plenty of room, so I'm happy. Then I check the other end of the puzzle. I can check that light against the cast shadows. Is that value relationship appropriate? And so if I've got room to go up to my highlights and I've got an appropriate value relationship with my cast shadows, I am in very good shape. That's the lightest part of the plate right there. Everything else gets pinker. And I haven't done my little blue edges, and I really do see them here quite a bit, so maybe we'll get some of those in there. It feels washed out to me. Let's do it. I have radiant violet, so let's take advantage of it. And I'm going to put some radiant violet with some ultramarine blue, and then we'll grab some of that, which is just alizarin crimson and white. So it's radiant violet is a color made by Gamblin. It is dioxazine purple and white mixed together, pre-mixed for you. So it's a convenience color, but it's nice to have that consistency. It's always going to be the same value, but you can certainly make your own. And I have dioxazine purple, the pigment, on my palette too, so I'm not really bringing in an outside element. That's always been my argument against just adding more paints, just adding more colors to the palette for fun. The more pigments you bring in, like I brought this phthalo to the party, but I didn't dance with it. Don't think I'm going to. I don't think I need to. Generally, I think that's going to be dark. What I like about phthalo is that it can really punch up your darks. It can really add some emphasis in little bits. It's a condiment. You know, it's like adding red pepper flakes to your pasta sauce. It can spice things up. But for me, it's usually not something I want to just go and take a big spoonful of and eat it like peanut butter. So, but here, everything is so subtle that let's just put that on there. Why not? Everything is so subtle that I kind of, woo. Yeah. That's what I mean by putting pops of color down that are not, it's not what you're seeing. They don't have to stay. It's like You can paint it any color you want as long as you match the value relationships. It's that advice. And why do it? To have fun. Okay, that cast shadow, that does need to be kind of softened a little bit. I'm blending. That's not usually what I would do, but it's sort of a special situation. Generally, instead of blending, what we think of blending, taking a clean brush, mushing two areas together, I like to do it just with the paint, massaging the areas of paint up to and into each other. It gets a little lighter right under here. Let's just leave that. Leave it alone. And just like when we paint an opaque plate, glass, bowls, plates, they're going to have fluctuations. Maybe there's going to be a place where they feel a little cooler for whatever reason. I don't have to know why. Just have to observe it. So every time I go back to the palette, maybe there's going to be a place where it feels a little darker because it's a sky hole. So every time I go back to the palette, maybe I'm changing a little my paint. It's a little spot there. You know, I have this sort of challenging round cast shadow here, but one thing I like about this painting for me, and the reason that I consider this a simple still life, is because there aren't a million little shapes in the negative space. This demo, oh my God, this last demo that I did, that I thought was going to be simple with the cranberries, it wasn't. It was a demo for this art group, not for this group. I thought, yeah, these objects are pretty simple. All the little shapes in the negative space were killing me. It was crazy. So, cranberries beware. It's a great subject for this time of year and a really fun thing to paint and a really big challenge when it comes to the shapes around the cranberries. And then I ate those cranberries. They were very good. I know every family must have this big debate about cranberry sauce. People have opinions. It's a nice little moment. Just clean up that one little spot and then perfect, move on. I've got some highlight here too, and I think I'll go a little darker in that spot so the highlight can show up. I'm just bringing in some of my cast shadow color into some of the plate color that I mixed, and maybe I'll bring some out into the light. Maybe I'll bring some more of that radiant violet in too, because it feels sort of cooler here. And this is how, I just am going around as I'm painting anything at any time. I'm just going around and making comparisons. How does this next thing I'm looking at compare to the last thing I looked at, value-wise, temperature-wise, color-wise? There's a little reflection there. I'm going to soften that edge a lot. I want to soften this edge a lot too. Arches oil paper. Already has this like velvety, nice, soft surface. Can be really satisfying to blend on, and it can be satisfying to create these brush strokes on. I really like it, but it doesn't necessarily cling on to your paint as well as a more textured canvas would. So it helps me because I can't do a ton of that kind of dry brush blending, which I don't like to do anyway. You know, I like to have my surface keeping me from doing that, because if you don't have enough paint down on your surface, you're not going to be able to blend anyway. You'll just pick it all up. Cool. Onward with the plate. It's a little darker. So we're inside the plate's cast shadow. Seen through the plate here. And then we're going to get that lovely moment with that leaf going under. I'm just going to get that filled in. Because once I get the underpainting really covered, I'm going to have more judgments to make, more comparisons to make, more of an ability to make decisions. Gorgeous. Okay, so what's outside of the cast shadow is a little bit cooler here on the plate. You don't have to really color in the lines at this point, because A, you've got a rim to put on, and B, you can clean it up with any other aspect of the negative space that you need to. Subtle, good enough. Subtle. I think I'll lighten that by darkening what's next to it. There, like that. Okay, just leave that. All right, yes. Someone asked me at the paint-in this past time, I think it was Elaine, she said, do you always talk to yourself? And I said, yeah, pretty much. The only difference is when I'm demoing, I'm talking to myself out loud. And when I'm alone, most of the time it's quiet. But as I'm going through this process of decision making and comparing, yeah, I am sort of talking to myself in my mind. Lighter, darker, warmer, cooler, harder, softer, edge, like that. Okay. And as we approach the rim, maybe it gets a little lighter too. It's a lot actually lighter. And let's see, where do we want to go next? Let's do the cast shadow. No, let's do some leaves. Let's do some leaves. And then we'll do the fun parts. The leaves. Let's start with the leaves that are on the outside. The loose leaves, the one here that I taped onto the other one. It's very orange. They look a little sad. They look a little autumnal, don't they? But I can make them more green if I want to. They look kind of green right now, but on my palette, this color looks very orange. Color gets all the credit. Value does all the work here. I want to show the architecture of what's going on with this leaf. I need to squint and look at values first and foremost. Nah, it's not even dark enough. It's a tone color, it's the same. Okay, I'll darken it with my little lovely mixtures. Brown. We have this underside that's very dark. This curved under part. Again, complicated forms. Doing a preliminary drawing never hurts. Oh, and on the edges, it's dark on the edges too. It's a little bit translucent under here. Let's just really give it some orange. And then where it gets seen through the plate, we'll go back to tone color. And does it touch its cast shadow? It does. This little flipped up part, we're also gonna try to make that glow a little bit with some saturation. Maybe too much. And I have this sort of interesting edge here. And then, of course, we have this kind of gradation, this yellowing. I don't want to get all in there, but I might give it some. This is the back of the brush now. I might give it some. That didn't work. It didn't work either. I don't want to get too into this, the veins and everything, because it's not about this leaf. And we'll just indicate them just a slight bit. I scratched into the canvas, and now maybe I'll just come in and fill in some of those scratches. You don't want to come in and try to make delicate little lines with like the nose of your paintbrush just head on, because it generally won't be delicate enough. So what I would do to do something like that is first I scratched, and then I just sort of dabbed it or printed this sort of patting motion. It's not, you know, it's not connect head on and do this. I wouldn't do that. Even for this stem, I think I was kind of more like touching it with the side and just sort of doing like a long stroke with the side of the brush. You don't, the front doesn't do anything except make a ditch in the paint. I think we've all experienced that. And then again, the leaf, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be leafy and do its job, being that kind of, being what it is, but being a dark shape really. So I'll give it a sky hole here. What's plate? And what's ground? There's a little bit of a rim. Not much of one. Real slight temperature difference probably can show that for us.
Is there a question for you?
Mm-hmm.
I had this fright between how you and Todd go about approaching a form like relief. Tell me if I have this right here. So, is your approach basically big areas, the light side, the dark side, and then you went in and you said, okay, what variance do I see in the light? What variance do I want to pick out in the dark? And smaller strokes within those two larger areas. Versus Todd, which seems to me kind of starts by always, like he's got a small brush. He's not going for the large area. He's modeling the form from, say, the most dramatic, maybe light basing plane towards the dark. But he's not maybe thinking in large areas. Is that right, or different thought on it?
Well, I think that you are correct as far as his approach and my approach. Yes, I am looking for the overall big value pattern in conjunction with what's happening geometrically. So both of us are thinking about what's facing the light the most strongly. But I'm trying to think about how I can take this curvy, complicated shape here and make it as simple as possible so that I can render it. So that I can show the action of it. And value is what does that. I mean, drawing some of it is drawing, but value is what does that. So my first thought is, can I divide it up into a few simple value shapes? Color can come later and do whatever it wants to do. But so I look at this leaf and I go, well, there's this top part that's light. And actually, I don't think I made it light enough. And then the undersides are all darker. So how do I show that that's turning under? What can I do to that edge to show that it's turning under? Can we lighten this a little bit to really play that up? But there's all this, I think both of us are interested in form first, and correct color and 100% accurate detail later. maybe we're just attacking it in broader strokes. So yeah, so I think that your summary is right. Maybe I'm just doing what he's doing, but on a very much more general scale.
Yeah, and your approach for, looking at the general areas first, like you mentioned, those 4 areas, is that what really is key to having a looser painting versus going in there and doing, how Todd, I suppose, approached it?
Mm-hmm. It is for me, but also for me, the key to having a looser painting is putting things down and leaving them alone, not rendering the whole form and then moving on to the next form, but working from the general to the specific all over the painting. So I don't want to finish this. Well, actually, I would like to finish this leaf before moving on, but I don't want the leaf at a high degree of finish. So I do want to sort of stop before I'm 100% sure that it's quote unquote perfect. Just so, A, it's a supporting character. I want to give it a chance to be done. And B, maybe there's something I do in a totally other part of the painting will cause it to become finished. Or maybe I'll figure out something when I come down here and paint this guy that I needed for that anyway. So don't beat it to death. I can't figure it all out necessarily in a vacuum. I have to work around the painting to kind of educate myself about what's going on in my painting or where I want to take it. So stopping sooner. That's the key. And putting things down and just letting them be. I think that's the hardest thing. That's the hardest thing for me and for the people in my workshops that I see, is just leaving it alone. And he is not a proponent of putting it down and leaving it alone. He's a proponent of, let's carefully do this, and then we'll just be done with it. And I think that's fine. I think it's good. Squint and simplify. That's what I say. You can always come back in and do more, but you can't come back in and do less unless you scrape. Right? Those of you who are devotees of scraping will agree. But less is more. You can show form with edges. I'm going to try to do that here. No, that's not light enough. That's going to be too light. Maybe not. I mixed up all this paint for these greens. Good thing I have the persimmon tops. We're going to go there next. It's really dark. Good, 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 good. And then he's kind of crispy up here. His edges are dark. And there's this cast shadow. Where does the rim, the plate rim, goes? Do, 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 do. We'll do it with red. Let's do it with the color that it is. I hope that answered it, Kayla. Good. The plate rim goes there, and then there's this cast shadow that goes across this leaf. And it lines up. So, tone color. I love my tone color. It's definitely useful for a lot of things. It's a little bit literal, but let's just leave it for now. Because it should go into this. This is all little stuff. I don't like painting tiny little stuff. So let's not have it be so small. Let's move on. All right, we're gonna do the leaf tops. And And these are very complicated. So first we're going to squint and we're going to just try to take it to what's light and what's dark, or what's in light and what's in shadow. And if it's too complicated and you can't see what's going on, it doesn't matter what you're painting. If it's too complicated and you can't see what's going on, just squint and simplify. You're off the hook. You don't have to paint it. If you can't see it, don't paint it. There's nothing there. Like, don't get up on it with a microscope or a magnifying glass and make yourself nuts. If you can't see it, you don't have to paint it. That feels very saturated. So if it's too yellow, we'll put some purple in it. On the surface, they're kind of ugly colors, but they have a very subtle beauty to them. And these are the kinds of greens that should be mixed with ivory black. Katie and I were talking about this yesterday, how Zorn palette is actually kind of perfect for persimmon tops. Can't see it, we don't have to paint it. I can sort of see it. It's amazing what one or two edges can do for you. I think about some of the paintings we looked at earlier. The one of the anemones that I was enamored with. There was not a lot of hard edge action going on in there. It was really mostly in the focal area, and so just amazing what one hard edge can do, especially when it can be played off against a bunch of soft edges. It's really just a brown, and I'm not making it, I don't know, something's off here. Because I put a lot of yellow ochre in these green mixtures, they're not extremely dark, and I think that's okay. Let's just go ahead and do that whole shape, and we'll come in with the light parts after we get it on there. Yeah. No, it's too light. There's this leaf that kind of comes up in front. Bang, I think that might be it. We'll do some edges. This guy has a little edge right there. And there's a little piece of light right here. It actually could be orange. Yeah. And then I want to put an edge on this, but this is also orange. Great. I don't think it really is going to need anything else, but it does need to sit on the form a little better, doesn't it? So this needs to come up. Ugh, dirty brush. Clean it in the paint, but it's only going to go so far. Gotta be careful. It's to come up right to that, and then it starts to have its cast shadow, and then we'll come back into the cast shadow. How am I doing on time? Did we decide someone was going to time me?
Oh, that's exactly 1 hour you asked us to remind you. 2:52.
I'm good, I tell ya. You train yourself with the timer long enough. There was a point where I used to do, for years, a couple years, I would have stroke economy be 10 minutes. I think 10 minutes is a very reasonable amount of time for stroke economy. And it got to the point where I was so like auto-programmed on 10 minutes, I just barely even needed the timer. It was funny, I was so trained from timing my students. And now it's kind of 20 minutes because we do twisted 20s. I don't have time stroke economy anymore. The timer stresses everybody out so much, I figure. Some things shouldn't be timed, but then it just tends to drag. Cast shadow. I mean, I want this to feel like this cast shadow of the leaves, and it's really, the cast shadow is really important. So it's a little mini abstract painting within a painting, those guys. I'm going to bring that in front and I want to set this behind it. So it should be more brown. And so you get to the point where you can't really even see what's going on anymore, and then that's probably a good time to just give that a rest and go to the next one. So this guy down here, his green top. I mean, I've been painting persimmons for years, you guys, and I've always found that with the tops, less is more. The less I paint, the better it is with these guys. What's in light and what's in shadow? We'll start simple. So I'm kind of thinking like mid-tone now, and then I can come back in with the lighter lights. Okay. Perfect. Gotta come back in with the lighter lights and the darker darks. And this part has some lights too, but it's mostly facing away, so we'll give it the dark treatment. I have an irritable cat in the hallway. Yowling. But I can't let her in, you know. She, when I'm alone in the studio, she can come in, it's fine. But if the microphone cord is out, forget it. It's too interesting. We love our studio pets, don't we, everybody? Little small marks, but we really want to still be keeping it simple, general to the specific. Let's get that middle part. The flat part is an interesting color. What color is it? You can paint it any color you want. Just match the values. I'm going to make it, is that matching the value? It's too chromatic. There's nothing like putting some green and some purple. It's really gray. It's kind of this like orangey gray. Weird color. Paint it any color I want. But I do want to match the values. So just commit to something pinky orange. And I didn't really need to paint that stem first. That was pretty clunky of me, but I thought I could carve it out. Now I got to go in and paint it again. Yay me. And a little light top. It's very small stuff. I am going back and forth between lights and darks pretty quickly, but I just am wiping my brush off in between. I'm staying in the green family, so I don't feel like I need to really clean it strenuously. Give it a little light edge right there. The more detail I put on this, the more focal point it's going to be, as we know. And now I can come back into this one's cast shadow too, and sort of clean it up. It needs to be darkened also. A little bit of blue. It's just a browny orange. Darken that a lot. Still think I made it, I mean, it looks too green. I painted it all with basically what I consider oranges, and still the dark greens look too green. It's crazy. Persimmons. Just put some straight up yellow ochre on it, why not? So it's been an hour, I think. Let's see if 20 more minutes can do it. So maybe this guy is going to be my focal point. I mean, I seem to be the most interested in him. That's okay. Me.
Sarah, do you have any thoughts on the size of your size of the, let's say, persimmons in this case, compared to the real persimmons in the setup? Do you try to keep them the same size, bigger, smaller? Do you?
That's it.
Matter to you?
It's a good question. I think people sort of naturally fall into a preference around scale. My preference is for painting life size or smaller. And these are about life size. They're maybe a little smaller than life size, but not very much. And that is kind of easy for me. But I don't know. I don't know that I did it on purpose. Like, I'm not sure that I said, oh, well, I'm going to paint this in 8x8 so that they can be life size. I did not do that. I said, I'm going to paint this in 8x8 so that, because I want to make a small painting. I want to have a demo that I can get paint on the whole canvas. And so that was the calculus there. But it's a different challenge to take a bunch of complicated information and pare it down into a small canvas than it is to blow something up larger than it actually is. And I think that by practicing both things, I need a new rag. I think by practicing both ways, we come to what works better for us. Now, if you want to paint big, you can always make a big still life. That would feel more natural to me, I think, than taking these tiny little guys and just saying, well, let's blow them up huge. Although some artists are really good at that, like Dwayne Kaiser. He can paint tiny and he can paint big, and when he paints big, he generally paints the same kinds of subjects that he paints really tiny. And that, looking at his work, just sort of feels like that's the challenge that he enjoys. And for myself, I don't know. Did that answer it?
Yeah, thank you.
Good. Comfort zone. I mean, scale really is all about comfort zone, but it's an interesting problem. Because we shouldn't have to be constrained by our comfort zone. sphere.
Why did
I always think painting like bigger than it actually is in life. It's
Mm-hmm.
just like a different challenge altogether. Like something's often I look at it and it looks so like it's wrong. Like something's not right. Do you know what I mean? It's
Mm-hmm.
like I need to figure out strategy once it gets bigger than life size, maybe bigger brush or something. But it never seems right to me. It seems like.
I agree. It's difficult. The last painting I did was definitely bigger than life size. It was a 12-inch painting, and I painted that little teacup. It was what I did at the paint-in. And I finished that, and it was like, you're right, it was the same experience. It was like something's wrong. And I don't know if that's because we just like feel like it's wrong because we know what size it was and we're just not comfortable with it, or if it's actually harder to render it that way. All right, I'm pretty.
why did you paint a light purple instead of peach?
It does look kind of purple. The colors on my palette are not purple. I mean, there are some purples in it. Where I feel that it gets cooler, I did add purple. But what I'm about to do now, well, actually, I think I'm about to do some work in the rim of the plate. And then we're going to go into the negative space. And I think what I'm going to do in the negative space is going to cause the plate to become pink, because against all this orange, things often look bluer than they are. Good question. So a lot of orange still lingering from my underpainting.
Are you going to make the persimmons darker, or are you just not trying to make it the way it actually is? You're doing what you like.
Am I going to make the persimmons darker? I don't know. I think not. I think I'm done with the persimmons. When I put the lights in the negative space, I think that that's going to resolve. And if it doesn't, then we'll deal with that then. That's wonky.
You painted it the way it felt to you, or the color? I'm just interested in your choice of color.
Yeah. So starting with the light sides of the persimmons, I am going for color and value, but then as I'm moving into the shadow sides, I'm comparing them to the light sides. So I want the light sides correct relative to the shadow sides, and that all correct relative to the cast shadow. And then I'm looking at this and I'm going, yeah, that edge, it's like checkering. What's dark against the light, what's light against the dark. So yeah, that is a lot darker than this. Even in the light, it's darker. So it's possible that the plate might have to get lightened, or the persimmon might need to get darkened there. I think that's probably what will happen, just at the edge. It's what's happening at the edges that's not 100% right yet. So yeah, so I was having fun with color, but where it meets the plate, the persimmon is darker, and that's going to turn the form. See, it doesn't take much. And so like coming into the negative space, what do I have here in the negative space? I have this part that is the cast shadow. The negative space is going to be a lot cooler. It's still objectively warm. But it's going to be, the canvas is kind of drying, but it's going to be cooler than the plate. This is the cast shadow part of the plate.
But it does say that it's, in terms of isolating fat, consider it a fat, I guess is what the product is saying. So if you're putting like a fat medium down initially to help the paint move, how does that work if you then kind of want to go over that? Like sometimes at the end you'll grab extra gel and like a highlighter or something. Is that like, is there any kind of consideration you're doing that maybe you're just not saying out loud about when you need to go over that again if you need to change the consistency of the paint again?
Like, I guess when I am adding more for a highlight like that, my consideration is getting that highlight to stick, getting it off the brush. Whereas when I'm just starting in on my underpainting, the consideration is more of what's the paint consistency? Is it flowing? Is it attaching to the canvas appropriately? How does it feel? But I don't do a ton of layers, so I don't worry about fat over lean a lot. I'm more worried about getting paint to stick to other paint. So yeah, I'm not quite sure if I'm answering that correctly.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm always kind of thinking about, we talk about drawing different rates and all this. So let me be maybe more specific. Like let's say you go to do the leaf and you grab some of the gel and you paint in the light area of the leaf with some of the gel in your paint, and that makes it flow real nice. Then you're ready to go in and start maybe doing some details. Maybe you want to add a bit of yellow, like you did with light in that area. Do you have the same consistency of paint, or do you need to make it thicker? Is that now sitting on top of the gel and it's going to dry at a different rate? Or do you know what I mean? Like in that thought process.
You know, I don't overthink drying rates and paint consistency, and maybe I should, but I'm not really concerned with how archival my painting is going to be for 1,000 years. And I think that's not an uncommon attitude among artists. I think most of us are using mediums to get the paint to behave the way we want it to behave in the moment. But yeah, so if I had painted the leaf already with a bunch of gel in it, and then I went to put paint on top of it, I'm gonna think twice before I get a bunch of walnut oil into my paint. Yeah. Because I know, like I can see already how thick that paint is on the canvas. Now you're making me sort of want to paint that leaf again. I can see how thick the paint is on the canvas. And so I know that I don't want to come in there with something super runny, because it'll just slide right off. But beyond that, it's not like a life and death consideration. I don't want to be picking up paint as I'm going over something. And so I'm watching out for what's gonna not make the paint get picked up. But as far as fat over lean, like what's fatter, solvent-free gel or walnut oil? I don't know. I think they are both fat, and we don't need to overthink it. It's just about what's gonna work.
Yep, unfortunately, you've met the world's most overthinker person ever. Wakes up in the middle of the night with her thoughts. So
Worrying about the adhesion of your solvent-free gel in the night. If only I had things like that to worry about.
yeah, I only have personal problems, but I have whole storage myself. No one has bought a painting, and then 2 months later it's cracked. And they're
Oh
like,
no.
be this idiot who didn't layer their solvent-free gel right, and I have to come before a board and answer your question. I'm being very loud for myself.
Okay, so that is not something to worry about. Yeah, don't worry about that. if that happened, you would fix it. Yeah? And I think that the varnish concerns that you've shared in the past are more valid than worrying about the paint cracking. I actually think that you have to work hard if you want your painting to crack. If people want that to happen, and that's generally something that people are worried about when they're glazing, doing a lot of layers. This kind of paint, in effect, it's layers. Alla prima, it is layers, but in effect, it kind of is all one layer really, because it's sort of all happening at once and it all sticks to itself and it's all sort of dries together. But if you were working in thin layers and letting them dry in between, you would really want to be sure that it was dry before going back on top of it with something. Yeah, so cracking is much more of an issue with glazing, painters who glaze. And in alla prima painting, if I wanted my painting to crack, if I wanted that texture, I would add something to it. There is this evil, evil stuff called cobalt dryer, which is terribly poisonous and will make your painting dry before your very eyes. And it will make it crack if you put enough in. But this isn't a product that I recommend anybody even buy or think about or know about. It's just trivia, really. I mean, I think it's basically useless. But what it would be used for would be in the days before we had all these wonderful fast matte paints and fast drying mediums. And if you wanted to make if you're making your own medium and you want it to dry faster, you would add this stuff. But it would be like one drop, or else the world will end. I used to have some. I don't think I still do. I used to have some. I had bought it in art school because I wanted to like see what would happen when the world ended. And it just smelled really bad and it dried really fast and it was not that exciting. All right, let's see. I am adding walnut oil now. My paper is dry from the Gamsol that I put on it. Again, we can soften these edges. And we can refine them too. And if you pick up some of that orange, go back to the palette and get more paint. But so this is brilliant white paper under here. But I don't want to take my lightest lights, all that light, again, because I need my highlights to show up. And so if I get too close to titanium white in the negative space, as bright as it is, everything's got to be relative. And I've got to keep it all pushed down the value scale or my highlights will not show up. And it will be so satisfying when they do. I like to paint my darks first, my shadows before my lights, because for me it's just easier to create those soft shadow edges. And it's nice, that's a little bit sunk in, so I can sort of just brush over it. Finger. But it's pretty dry. So let's see, what do I want to do as far as a temperature shift here? We'll do cooler in the back, warmer in the front. And so, I mean, I want you to understand that's a conscious choice. I can look at this and it all pretty much looks the same. It sort of feels a little cooler back here, but that's something I'm deciding, not something I'm observing. I want a temperature shift in the negative space. Could be darker even. The plate's real light back there. I want a temperature shift in the negative space. I'm going to choose to see one. Or I'm going to just decide that one is happening and make it so. That might just be able to stay the way it is. Especially with things like sticks coming in with the negative space is pretty critical. You can make it as knobby as you want. All the sticks and twigs that you see in my paintings are one of the first things that go on the canvas. And then they get refined with the negative space, just like this. This needs a soft, really soft edge. This is not about the leaf. Let's get out of there. Someone could be muted and they are not. You want to be mindful of your edges as you're filling in your negative space, and you want to be mindful of any gaps that you're leaving that show through to the underpainting. Let's bring that down, and then we'll warm it up. What's leaf and what's cast shadow down here is going to be shown with edges. Hard edge on the leaf, soft edge on the cast shadow. And I'm going to warm it up. Yep. All this brush mixing has gotten my brush very full of paint. It's not feeling good. Let's just get some of that out of there. Now, I generally do a lot of brush mixing in the negative space, but because it's so much more paint, because it's a bigger area, the brush can get full and it doesn't feel like it's going on very nicely. It could be lighter. I think it should be lighter. Warm white to the rescue. The more color you add to something as you're trying to create a temperature shift, the lighter it's going to get. The darker it's going to get. And then so, there we go. So you might need to lighten it again. Anytime you shift something or add something, you're probably going to darken just a little bit. And I almost always end up coming into my negative space with some hot spots at the end. What's really the lightest, brightest little spot? Where should I put it for maximum emphasis? Here, probably back there. Now that I've lightened the foreground a lot, probably want to lighten up back there too. You know, the negative space is the bane of my existence as a painter. It's important, and it's not as much fun to paint as the star players, and it's painstaking. So for me, I'm always leaving it till last, and then I complain about it, and I make you guys listen to me complain about it. So if you dread your negative space, you're not alone. Let's just get in and get out on that one. here. Soften, soften, soften. I've got white on that brush. And then we'll drag that right into this. Where's that paint? No. That's kind of fun. All right. So this feels like a shadow. Is that too light? It's kind of satisfying. That feels like the shadow of a translucent thing. Getting a little lighter at the edge, maybe too much. I heard that. And we're getting down to the point where we really only have highlights left to do. But I want to put a highlight in the background there. I'm going to put a hot spot on the ground here. It's not a sky hole, it's a hot spot. I've coined that term now. What do we think? Is this distracting? Because that's underpainting, and I think I can just get away with it. And now I do want to adjust the color, the value of the plate there, because there's almost no contrast here. It's very, very light. And so it's like cooking in the recipe when we've all been cooking this past week. They say taste and adjust your seasonings. And it's pretty easy at the end to just tweak my value relationships. Now it's happening. And like that. Just kind of come in and look again. Not repainting the whole thing. Tweaking.
Well, thanks for this demo, Sarah. This was very, very, very helpful to see. Even though I think I've heard you say all these things before, for some reason I just hear it again 50 at a time, and I'm like, oh yeah, value relationships are very important. Simplify it. So it's good to hear it again.
Thank you, Kayla. And if you want to go to bed, go to bed. No, it's pretty late there. Actually, it's not. It's like 8 o'clock. What am I talking about? You have to stay up. Not excused. That's just warm white cut with some other stuff. It's pretty close to warm white. This is a little pinker. This is going to be that sort of lamp highlight that's right here. Oh, that's pretty light. When you stay really dark with your other lights, then you have so much room to go up toward your highlights. It's fantastic, and it really is a lot of fun. It's a cast shadow here. Very subtle. I don't even think I needed that. Because then your highlights can be colorful. The darker you stay with your lights, all these lights, everything in this painting is high key. The darker I stay with all of that stuff, then the more color I can have in my highlights. And it's not just titanium white. Highlights have color. All right, let's finish the highlights. Where else do we have highlights? Down here. And those are colorful highlights too. And we'll put some gel in. that's too light. More color. Oh, I'm snotty, you guys. I need more medicine. One, two, and remember, just because you see a highlight doesn't mean it has to happen on the painting. I'm so shaky from all that cold medicine I took. I usually would not need to steady myself to do that. Where else? Where else? These? Maybe? We're going to do that with color, not light. Over here. Okay, maybe we'll do it with a little bit of light too. Colored glass is a lot of fun to paint, but it presents a lot of challenges. Cast shadows or have color in them. Everything is very interesting. Let's see. I'm feeling pretty good about this. I'm feeling like, what am I feeling? Like maybe this stuff has got too dark. It's like salt, like I always say. White in painting is like salt in cooking. You can always add a little more at the table. It's not that hard to lighten things. It's really hard to darken things once you've gone too light with them. And then I just want to touch the rim a little bit more. And then we're going to put highlights on the Persimmons, and then we are going to run screaming from the studio. Yes? You know, I talk about this all the time. Everybody's got their favorite stage of the painting, and mine is not the last part. I like the beginning. Finishing stages of a painting gives me anxiety. Artist anxiety. I used to have this friend who painted, and she used to call it AA, artist anxiety. Painting is not for the faint of heart, after all. You paint from the general to the specific, and then you get to decide how much detail you come in with at the end. This is feeling kind of bad to me. I want that highlight to pop a little bit more. And then the rim, just clean it up a little bit. So you can see I spend way longer on the things that aren't the things. And that's pretty common. Still, that's a brighter highlight there. There, to really give it some oomph. And now let's put the highlights on the Persimmons. Those are going to be low-level highlights for sure. soft edged ones. Give the leaf a little highlight. Maybe that leaf wants a little highlight. This is the Bob Ross portion of the program. Poor Bob. And that one's really cute. That's like a little yellow highlight. Oh, you gotta have clean palette somewhere for highlights. So, come on, Sarah. I want to check in with the stick one more time. Maybe with that edge. I don't want to lose that beautiful pink that I did on the edge there, but I can put it back in. I want to really pop that forward. Give it kind of a hard edge there. Pink, pink, pink. All right, guys, I think that was the click. Did I miss anything? Is there anything horribly wrong here? And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a picture of this, I'm gonna go eat lunch, I'm gonna look at it outside of the studio, and I'm gonna do what? I'm gonna say, if I was gonna spend 20 more minutes on this, what are 5 things that I might do? And whether I do them or not, I don't know. Sometimes it's better to just stop sooner and let it be. Okay, I'm signing.
I think you're amazing.
Thank you, ma'am. I enjoyed this. I have enjoyed...
But you do, I don't know how you do this in front of people.
Oh, I don't know. I've been doing this in front of people for quite a few years now. It's fun. It gets me out of myself. So I like to sign a painting while it's still wet so I can use paint from the palette. Oh my God. So as an aside real quick, when I was having that conversation with that gallerist on Friday, the horrific one where I had sold the painting that I had shipped to him, oh my God. He says to me, I'm glad I have you on the phone because I want to give you a piece of advice actually. He said, you've got your signature and that's all good. But you should really be writing your full name on the back of your painting as well. And I put a tag on the back of my painting, but it's not a permanent tag. He said, I resell a lot of art and it's very frustrating when people bring this art in and you can see a signature, but if you can't recognize that signature, sometimes it's very hard to track down who the artist was. So from now on, I will be writing my full name on the back of my painting, on the stretcher bar or just on the panel. But I digress. Well,
Will you do that with paint or ballpoint? What will you? What?
probably either ballpoint or Sharpie. Probably ballpoint.
I made like a ballpoint, like a Sharpie can go through the canvas. I mean, actually, usually doing it with oil pencil on the canvas.
Yeah.
Because I kind of afraid if it goes through like me.
Sure. And I would do that on a panel though, like on a masonite panel. I don't think I'd be worried about Sharpie migrating through.
Yeah, but if you paint on the canvas, you probably
Right.
painting on the canvas.
I don't paint on stretch canvas that much, but I do. But I mean, I'd be writing it on the stretcher bar.
I painting on my attic. It's probably a lot of money. Do you know who's an artist? Even like he showed me the picture. Does it have like a signature on the back? No, just initials. So we had like hard time, and since that I'm always signing.
Mm,
I mean, always.
there you go.
I'm joking, yes, but it's like it's good like to know like full name because initials. I mean, how many could be JKs?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And in theory, you would want to write that on the canvas itself if you were writing on the back, because in theory, the canvas could be taken off the stretchers. Anything could happen. But I think for my purposes, it's like we talked about, I'm not worried about archival. I'm not worried about like a wartime situation where someone has to smuggle my painting out of the country, rolled up in a tube. That's not going to happen. So I think on the stretcher bar is sufficient. But yeah, and it's not something I had thought about. Like I believe in signatures, but I don't know, I guess I'm going to sign and then we can keep talking about this. So I got a lot of paint on the brush. I went for orange, something that's going to show up but not be too contrasty. This is a liner brush. It's a size 0 by Princeton. You can also use something called a rigger. And this is craft store stuff, pretty much, this brush. And then I am anchoring my hands on the easel. And we'll sign it nice and clearly so my gallerist will not mistake me. Dot the I. Great. Ta-da. So, what were we saying? I don't remember.
You don't want to run screaming.
Yes. Now is the portion of the show where I run screaming from the studio. Let's go to autofocus. Dink. All right. Thank you so much for joining me today. It was a lot of fun. And what time do we even have? It is 12:40. Wow. Thank you guys for hanging in there with me. This is a long haul. It's been a good day, and I hope you're all feeling really inspired to go run into the studio and paint something orange, whether it's persimmons or oranges or not something orange. So we have come to the end of the month. What am I gonna do? I'm gonna send invoices out to those of you who are staying with me. Those of you who don't want to continue into December or take a month off for the holidays, that's totally fine. Just let me know. Today sometime would be good. Otherwise, look for sign-ups for one-on-ones on the 2nd as usual. And mark your calendars. The group session for December, which will be a live portrait painting demo from my studio of our lovely model Katie, who's a member of our group, who's volunteered to sit for us. That's going to be Saturday, December 18th. What did we say, Katie? 11 a.m. Pacific start time? Is she still here? I don't think she's here. I think we said 11 a.m. Pacific to start, but it might, yeah, I think that's what we said. It might be 10. So 12:18 group session, and I look forward to finishing out another wonderful year with you all. Thank you so much for being a part of this program.
Thank you. Feel better.
My pleasure. Bye, everybody.
Feel better.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Have you ever used a navy pot?
I have